how do we actually measure sustainability when it comes to hemp? How do we actually make it advantageous for a farmer to grow hemp over this or that, while also not hurting? I mean, nobody wants to hurt the corn or the soy industry. I mean, well, some people do, but we can't. Like, that's just how the world goes round. And so it's just a slow progress, and you need smart people, that have done this before, advocating for you. It's not, vote hemp. God bless them. They've been around for 20 years, but it took the Roundtable 2 years to get done what Vote Hemp's been trying to do.
Hey guys, it's Mandi with Global Hemp Association. I wanted to say thank you so much for joining. I'm excited about the opportunity to build a relationship and connect this supply chain. I mean, after all, that's why we started the association. Our association was built on the foundation of connecting supply chain, building relationships, and helping you grow your business. Anyone from farmers, manufacturers, and distributors, people that are passionate about the supply chain, and those creating products selling into biofuels, plastics, textiles, construction, and building materials. Hello, everybody, and welcome, Josh. I'm really excited about connecting. I was really, really stoked about this last week. We were just chatting offline about NOCO and everything that we had going on there. So for those of you that were there at NOCO, thank you very much for stopping by our booth. And any that I missed, I would still love to connect with. I was just saying to Josh that we had a beautiful booth, and our booth was always full, but I missed walking the floor and missed walking to all the conferences. And so if I missed you, please drop us a note, say hello today. We'd love to hear from you. But I'm really excited about our guest today, to hear everything that you've had going on in the industry. Josh, you've been around for a little bit and have quite a diverse background. So I'll hand it over to you if you wouldn't mind giving a quick intro about who you are and how you got into the industry and what you're doing now.
Sure. Thanks for having me. Compliments on that commercial right before we started there. That was awesome.
Well, thanks.
The story of how I got in the industry is a wild one. I got interested in hemp in the mid 2000s, probably around 2004 or 5, simply because I had to find something interesting to give a speech on in my public speaking class in college. And my grandfather gave me this documentary called Hempsters Plant the Seed, which if you know Joe Hickey and a lot of people, I guess it's probably the only one, but that are still in the industry. Back in the 90s, they got Woody Harrelson to plant a seed of hemp in Kentucky and called the cops on themselves and got arrested. And my grandfather was kind of on the periphery of that. He considered himself a bit of a hippie, I guess you would say, back in the day, and certainly supported all cannabis legalization. But his attorney, Gatewood Galbraith, is actually kind of, I guess, the person that really got me into it, because he got him into it. And so I watched that documentary, and I read Gatewood Galbraith's book, The Last Free Man in America. And I was in college, and I gave this speech about how there's industrial hemp in there's hemp in every other industrial country in the world except for the United States, and how you can't get high. It's not intoxicating. It's really about, back then it was really just food and soap and fiber, because you had Dr. Bronner's and you had Nativa and you had some of the OGs. But nobody even knew what CBD was, and everybody knew that marijuana got you high, and hemp was all the other stuff you can make. Rainbow sandals were big at the time. So I remember giving that speech and really having a lot of conversations in the research facet of it. One with Joe Hickey himself, which he probably doesn't remember meeting me that long ago. But basically,
I've always wondered like how you guys connected. So I love.
Well, we reconnected in 2014. I'll get to that. But okay. But so basically explaining to me that you can't legalize hemp in just Kentucky, right? Because it can't go anywhere. And for hemp, what I thought of it back then, to really go anywhere, we're talking about massive amounts of hemp going into car door panels and everything that we talk about when it comes to materials. So I graduated college, moved to Charleston, South Carolina, and didn't think about it again. Started doing fundraising for nonprofits and did that for 4 years in Charleston. Took a job in Richmond, Virginia in 2012, doing the same thing, chasing a little bit more money, which I now realize was like this much money. And, to leave the beach, that was an even bigger negative. So I quickly became what I would call clinically depressed. And I say that because I was no longer at the beach. I wasn't really happy with what I was doing. I was reading all kinds of books and watching all kinds of documentaries about entrepreneurship and how to, I was literally thinking about moving home to my grandfather's farm and becoming a vegetable farmer and starting a CSA and like what happiness is and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. But in the front of my mind, that was always in the back of my mind. In the front of my mind, I was actually considering grad school, either law school or business school. And if you know me, that means I was definitely clinically depressed because I hate school. And I was legitimately researching, applying, like looking into all this stuff and looking back on it. There was something wrong. But kind of out of nowhere, as I was doing all this stuff, went down this deep path of sunscreen. I wanted to get in the sunscreen business. And I'd always, for about 6 years at that point after college, I'd been all natural products. I'd stopped taking any ibuprofen, Aleve, anything that was synthetically formulated or anything like that out the door. So 2014 rolls along and I'm back home. I guess it was 13 actually. Back home in Kentucky going to the horse races, and I pick up the paper one morning, and on the front page of the paper, Jonathan Miller has written an article that says Gatewood was right, the gentleman I mentioned that wrote the book Last Free Man in America. Mm-hmm. And the long and short of his article was we absolutely should legalize hemp at the very least, because Kentucky is always last, and Kentucky has this rich history. If we hadn't outlawed hemp in the 30s, Kentucky wouldn't be the bluegrass state. We would be the hemp state. And it wasn't because we grew all the hemp. It was because we actually grew a lot of the seed that then went up to the northern belt where a lot of the hemp fiber was produced. And he also said we should legalize marijuana and tax it and everything. If you've met Jonathan, he's a liberal politician at heart, an attorney and lobbyist by trade now. But I read that article and I said, hey, so I reached out to him. I reached out to, at the time, Ag Commissioner Comer. He's now a congressman from Kentucky. And kind of used some of my Kentucky connections to get connected with those guys and said, hey, I'm in Richmond, Virginia. I'm close to DC. If there's anything I can do to help, kind of told them my college story. And if there's anything I can do to help, let me know. So also at that time, the Virginia Industrial Hemp Coalition, shout out Jason Amatucci, was starting, and they were having some happy hours. And just, it was fun to go and like have a couple beers and have these conversations about what the possibilities could be with hemp. And tagged along to DC, lobbied with Mitch McConnell and all that crew, and kind of basically made Jonathan give me free information as we were moving along with what was happening.
He didn't know at the time.
No, he didn't know. And as we were moving along with what was happening, I said, if this goes into the Farm Bill, this is going to be big, especially in Kentucky. And I know there's only going to be pilot project stuff, but what do I care? I'm 27. I want to be at the forefront of something. I want to get it on the ground floor, and I'll treat this like school. I'll treat this like business school. And so the Farm Bill passed in February of 2014. I walked to my boss's office and said, I'm putting in my 1 month notice. I'm moving back to Kentucky in March. And he said, oh, what are you going to do? I said, I'm moving home and I'm going to get involved in the hemp industry. And he looked me square in the eyes and he goes, that doesn't exist, right? And I said, that's the point. And so I embarked on this mission. I did treat it like business school. I basically woke up every day with the mission to learn more, meet more people, figure out who the real players were, and try to create a career out of it. And that was really what I was doing with fundraising, right? I'm a people person. I'm a relationship builder. I'm really a connector of dots now when it comes to kind of what my forte is in the industry. But I spent 14 and 15 learning some very hard lessons. I actually grew hemp on my farm in 15 by myself, which maybe the most stressful point I've ever had in my life, even more so than having a kid and dealing with COVID. God bless all you farmers, especially if you don't have, modern equipment and working machines and things, because that's what I did all day, every day, was just fix stuff. But I really was practice what you preach. I was putting hemp seeds in my shakes. I was using the hemp honey in my coffee. And then I guess about early 2015, I really started to understand what CBD was. Everybody was talking about it in 14. There was a lot of people coming to Kentucky because of the law change and things like that, and meeting people. And similarly to you, I had started the Kentucky Hemp Association. We were hosting our conference, and a bunch of people came. And afterwards, the compliment I kept getting on the conference was, man, this is the first time I've come to a hemp conference and everybody doesn't smell like weed. Like, there's real farmers here. There's politicians here. There's University of Kentucky officials. I think Mitch McConnell stopped by for a minute. Like, it was a real deal professional conference with people in sport coats and, looking the part. And one of those people was CV Sciences, Michael Mona III. He and I became fast friends. And he really made me, he and his dad and his best friend, Chris Morio, Michael Mona Jr., Michael Mona III, and Chris Morio, really explained to me kind of how they had gotten into what was Canavest at the time, now CV Sciences. And it was kind of similar. They had researched CBD. What is CBD? CBD this, CBD that. and found out that it's not intoxicating, that it's kind of been undiscovered, but it's rich in hemp. So they had gone to Europe and they had taken what we considered, back then hemp. It was tall, looked like a cornfield. It was fiber. That was what BMW was using in their door. All the stuff we had been saying in DC. And they were like, hey, can we have the tops off those plants that you guys aren't using? And they took that material, took it to a kiln and dried it, and then took it to a big hops extractor and said, can see what we can get out of it, and then imported that material. Now, this is 2012, 2013, 2014. Like, they could have gone to jail for a long, long time, but it was a risk they were willing to take. And it was one of those things where it was like me. I always said, like, I used to go around the country and give these speeches for CV Sciences where I would say, this is the ultimate disruption, right? We're disrupting all these different industries, including pharma and including ag, including materials, all that stuff. But the point of all these people that were against me, right? Like, this is illegal and you're going to get people in trouble, you're going to do this, was I'd rather be on the right side of history than not, right? I'd hate to be the guy that said, just like a great instance is Tiger Woods, the guy behind me. I'm glad I was never one of those people that said, oh, he'll never come back. He'll never come back. Because not only did it in 2019 when he won the Masters, which is behind me, but he's playing Augusta National today after the car wreck he had a year ago. So, it's just one of those never be on the wrong side of history kind of things. And I truly believe that what we were doing was going to change the world. It wasn't just CV Sciences, it was the industry as a whole. But the CV Sciences aspect kind of came from the fact that they were using what we would call agricultural hemp, something that's planted massively. It's not grown like tomatoes or tobacco. There's not any hand operation. It's not about small farmers. And as much as I love small farmers, I own a small farm. Hemp and cannabis. Hemp and cannabis aren't going to save the small farm, because the market for intoxicating cannabis and the market for CBD as an ingestible supplement, or cannabinoids in general, it can only get so big, right? But the market for materials and the market for animal feed and the market for human food additives is unlimited. And so the goal was always to get to that. CV Sciences and the way they were going about getting their cannabinoids was always kind of the reason I tied those two together, and really the reason I accepted the job, because the first 2 years in hemp, I was kind of anti-CBD. I thought that was the camel's nose under the tent for legalization, which I had been telling the politicians in DC for 2 years at this point that wasn't what we were doing. And I don't know, it just really aligned. So I ended up in 2015 accepting the director of business development role with CV Sciences. And that was right when things were really popping. From 15 to 2020, when I left, we grew that company from 6 million in sales to 54 million or 52, one of the two. Unfortunately, they are back down to about 20. That's what happens when you have a lot of people that are a little bit out of their brain capacity, probably, for where the company's heading and where it currently is. And
definitely was probably impacted by the crash of the CBD market in itself.
Sure. I don't know what's happening.
You're good.
There's somebody walking around in here. Sorry, can you repeat the question?
That's right. We were talking about the market, the change in their value or business. And I just made a comment that it was potentially also impacted by the crash of the CBD market.
So I actually have a different opinion. I don't think the market actually crashed. I think it corrected, right? I think that a lot of people were so enamored by the possibilities of CBD, and you look back at some of the numbers people were throwing around, and nobody ever stepped back. I did a lot, because I was taking CBD every day, and so was my mom, and so were all these people, because I was giving it to them for free, right?
Right.
And when you step back and you thought to yourself, how does one person afford this? Like, if you add up how much it would cost if I was buying this at retail, even if I was getting deals at the retail store every day, 10%, 20% off, how can any regular American afford $100 a month? Okay, now we're talking about $1,200 a year. If you're making $48,000, $50,000 a year, that's a lot of big chunk. That's after taxes. That's still a big chunk of your money. Reality is, some of these people are spending $200, $300, $400 a month, and it adds up. And that's just for this supplement. That's not including fish oil or curcumin or
any prescription.
Well,
Right.
and I can't relate to that, but I can't imagine when you add all that stuff up. And yeah, your health is the most important, sleep, hydration, all that stuff. But it really became this like no one's doing the math. So eventually we're going to peak at how many people can afford this. But even if you do the math, and it's been done since, if every American was taking 25 milligrams a day or 50 milligrams a day, how many acres of hemp would that actually be? And that's obviously all feminized hemp. And it's tiny, right? It's like, I don't know, 20,000, 30,000, even if it was 100,000 acres, let's say, who cares? That's nothing. Like the goal of hemp, because it is sustainable and it is carbon sequestering, all that stuff, is to get to 1 million acres and then 10 million acres and so on and so forth. The only way to get there is through fiber, which made me think that there is a reason for dual cropping. Like we have to get rid of this single purpose hemp. I'm not saying I'm right about that. I'm just saying, at least if we think that way, we lean we gear the conversation towards how do we get to a commodity, right? And
I've done a number of interviews, Josh, with large producers internationally that talk about the dual crop value in order to make the fiber market sustainable and profitable. And so, yes, and I'm with you. I don't know that it's the end process for every end application, but
sure,
definitely something that is considered when we talk about.
Let's call cannabinoid production feminized hemp, right? If you have cannabinoid production over here, that's great. That's certainly necessary. There's tons of uses. There's tons of cannabinoids that like we haven't even really gotten into yet, because CBD's dominated the whole hemp conversation. But the applications are endless for the other way we grow hemp, which is by row crop, right? Just let's say row crop versus feminized hemp. Row crop is endless opportunities, and there's still some CBD in there. I've said for years, there's probably going to come a day when someone's going to catch all the CBD blowing out the back of their combine and monetize that. And then all these hand manicures and things, like there'll still be a market for that, but they'll also just be just like there's Bud Light, right? And then there's craft beer. Yep. There's going to be a Bud Light. And I say Bud Light because I bought a case the other day, and man, it could not look like a more generic beer. It was sitting in the fridge and I was like, this looks like it came from the Duff Beer Company. Like it's just a square Bud Light thing. I don't drink Bud Light, but I was like, this is hilarious. Yeah. And so but that's what's going to happen, is you're going to have the everyday general thing that happens. And then you're going to have these specialty cannabinoids and specialty varieties similar to wine. So part of the conversation I had at NOCO when I was on the stage monitoring was, hemp got lost in the legalization of hemp. How do we bring it back around? But I don't want to lose all this. Obviously, I take CBD every day. I've had 4 hip surgeries. It's a big part of my life. I just want to normalize it. Like, I think it got overhyped to the point where people think like, oh, CBD. Yeah, it got to the point where I'd be on the plane and somebody would ask me what I was doing when I was traveling all the time. And I would say, oh, I'm in the CBD business. And they would almost giggle to themselves. And they would say, oh, so is my cousin or my nephew or my brother or my sister or my whoever. And it was like, man, everybody's in the CBD business. Then I got engaged to someone who had started a CBD company. So, and it's really a women's wellness company, but because of some non-competes she had, it started as a CBD company. And that in 2018, that was what was hot, and no one was marketing directly to women. And that was 82% of the customer base. Yeah. So I just have a big, like, long-term multi-year view of the industry. And I think it's because I learned a lot of lessons early on. There was a lot of people in those first 2 years. One of the hardest lessons I learned was, no matter how smooth a talker someone is, if they only want to have all your meetings at Denny's, chances are they don't have any money. And, things like that. And then, like, what I learned at CV Sciences was, like, once you really get to a big company and you have that rapid growth, the most important thing you can do is hire talent and bring in people who know what they're doing. I mean, CV Sciences, when we were there, I was the first one to be like, hey, has anybody here ever run a $50 million company? Has anyone here ever worked for a $50 million a year company? No? Okay, can we go find some people that have? And to this day, they still haven't. So, it's not, or they have, but they hired someone, that's down here now working at a level up here where they're probably in 3 levels over their head or something. And so, you don't legitimize a business like cannabis or hemp or any of the things that we're talking about by having a bunch of passionate people take it to succeed. You have to have those people too, but you also have to have people that have done this before that can relate it back to supplements or to other materials or to other food additives or whatever we're talking about, that really know how to steer that ship all the way through. So long and short is, what I've learned a lot over these years. And then in 2020, ended up going to work with Driftless, because all those things that we just talked about are all things that we aligned on. And we can get into that if you'd like.
Yes, I'd love to. There's a couple of questions, and I don't know if you want to answer this. There are a couple of interviews that I've done recently, but Brooke has a question about your opinion on cross-pollination on a dual crop, and has it been a problem?
I haven't seen any problems. They're in the drawer. Oh, hang on.
You're good. This is home.
Sorry, I had someone's keys. That's why they kept coming in here. The dual or cross-pollination is certainly something that's been talked about quite a bit. I don't think that it's something that has been a problem because we haven't reached that amount of acreage yet, right? Like, I know there's probably some neighbors that are like, oh, you're going to cross-pollinate this and that. I'm not the right person to answer that. I'm certainly not an agronomist. But I think that's something that will definitely have to be addressed. But again, my long-term view of this is that it's going to probably surpass female plants. And if not, then those female plants will probably go indoor, back in the holler, somewhere secluded. But I'm definitely not an expert enough to answer that kind of question or how it really plays out. I just think long-term goal, long-term view has to be towards massive acreage, and you're never going to get there with feminized plants, which are also not sustainable or any of the things that we brag about for hemp.
Well, and I think that I'll just go back. We've interviewed a couple of people just recently, and Brooke, I'm happy to send over some connections for you where we talk about this with a couple of agronomists and people that are growing large acreage for seed. What those look like, what genetics look like. So on our YouTube channel, there are a lot. Yeah.
And Sam Legal, who's our chief agronomist that you had on a few weeks ago, he would be a good person to ask that question too. Now,
he actually just wrote a book. He's got a book on Amazon. I just bought it. I'll see if I can't find it, and I'll share it as well.
Cultivating Cannabis.
There you go. There you go. Easy breezy. Okay, so talk to me a little bit about what you guys are doing now as far as the fiber production, and now we understand kind of where it's taken you. I'm interested in what is.
Yeah, so besides going around the country and trying to get everyone excited and to break the law, or what they thought was breaking the law, bringing these products into their stores, I was also really trying to get that European model into the U.S. and hopefully, companies like CV Sciences or Hemp Fusion or other folks that use a European style variety to get their CBD products, that they could that we could kind of replicate that here. Why we're not recreating the wheel? Let's just do the same thing. And along the way, we worked with University of Kentucky, Murray State. Like I said, I grew hemp senselessly on my farm, as did some of my neighbors and some really good farmers in Kentucky. But this group reached out to me from Wisconsin. They were already ahead of the curve in terms of their thought process on row cropping and how it competes with whatever else they were doing in that area at the time that I didn't understand. And the presentation was just a knockout. And so I was like, let me come visit you guys and see what you got going on. They didn't have anything going on. Wisconsin hadn't legalized hemp until, I guess it would have been 18, which means 19 was their first growing season. And this was like fall of 18. But I was so impressed with their makeup, right? So it's a father who is a certified agronomist and runs an ag supply, or at the time ran an ag type supply thing for the community, where tons of seed would come in and then get distributed out to all the different farmers. And he was the consultant on up to like 25 or 30,000 acres, a lot of which was certified organic, which was big for me because putting something in your body, there's a lot of bad things that can happen along the way if it's not certified organic, on and on. And so you have Ed Senior and the youngest son, Sam, who you've had on your pod, or on this. What do we call this? A podcast?
Yeah, live broadcast.
Live broadcast. Yeah. Sam, certified agronomist, the farming aspect of it. And as you can see, they did pretty good. They wrote that book after their first season. Mm-hmm. The other brother, Simon, is a money management, fund type of guy. And then the third brother, Ed Jr., is an engineer by trade. And what do you need when you're installing all this types of equipment? Engineer. And so they kind of laid out to me their plan. This was in 18. And I said, well, why don't you guys grow for, at the time, CV Sciences, do some fiber research for us to show us that the farmers can do this, because Josh Hendrix, the farmer, certainly can't do it. I don't even have a big enough farm to do that style of farming. But if you guys can prove the concept, then we'll see where it goes. And so 2019, you can look on Driftless website. There's probably some video that we had shot from back then. First growing season, they do both. They do feminized hemp over here and dual cropping hemp over here. And it was, to answer that earlier question, spread out far enough where there was no cross-pollination. But the fiber crop that they grew that some of the material ended up at Patagonia and some other places was phenomenal. It was a 30-acre field, certified organic, no pesticides or herbicides or anything like that. And it was gorgeous. And it was especially gorgeous for the filming and photo shoots that we were doing and everything. And so they really proved to me their ag side. Fast forward, they harvest 6 months later. COVID hits. We go into summer of 2020 and we started having conversations, and they're like, yeah, we just got this facility and we're doing this drying. And so we kind of start walking through everything they're doing. I was like, man, you guys really got your act together here. Like, compared to all these other companies that I was talking to at the time that have, $25-30 million in debt and no revenue to show for it. The CBD, as you said, the CBD market has crashed or corrected, and they all want to be ingredients suppliers, but most of these people aren't GMP. Most of these people aren't certified organic, and they're like right on their way, which now we're both of those things, right on their way to having all those boxes checked. But the real thing that triggered me was their real focus was fiber. This whole cannabinoid thing's great. We learned it. We've grown it now. This is two growing seasons under our belt. We've got extractors. We've got third-party manufacturers. We've got all this system lined up, and that's all great. But that's just a very small portion of what we see as our revenue stream in the long run of this company. And so that's where we started, we kind of hit heads and said, let's figure that out. Obviously, I bring in some of my expertise and connections and things like that from the cannabinoid side. They also had launched their own in-house brand. And to be unique, they decided to put a guy with a hard hat on the front and call it Workman's Relief and price it affordably. And that was the real cherry on top for me was, okay, we've got this ingredients business. Obviously, I can try to go out and get contracts with all the big boys that I know, all the little, medium, small, whatever size CBD businesses that are out there. There's 3,000 of them, as you know, or maybe not now, but there was. And this finished product brand, it actually plays. It's hard to get people to understand it. It's hard to get people to not think it's going to take away from the rest of their category. But the reality is, if you go onto workmansrelief.com right now, you can order a 3,000 milligram certified organic, peppermint flavored, THC removed. So we're not talking isolate, we're talking remediated out. And you can purchase that for $39.99 in a one-time purchase. If you subscribe, you can purchase it for $29.99, which, if you do the math, you can take 100 milligrams of CBD a day, certified organic, peppermint flavored, tastes great, THC free, in case you're worried about drug test, for $1 a day. Or you can take 50 milligrams a day for 50 cents, and it works out like that. Now, everybody's going to say that's too cheap. A 3,000 milligram tincture should be $120, but it goes back to that first conversation we had. Why? I know how much it costs to make that.
Right.
If the CBD market actually crashed, how come nobody lowered their finished products prices?
Right.
Because they can't afford to, because their businesses are built on hype, smoke and mirrors, and debt. And you can't pay that debt back if you lower your cost of goods and sell the same amount. But what I keep trying to explain to people is we reach that cap of people that can afford CBD just willy-nilly here and there.
Right.
It's got to be something where people buy it once a month at the grocery store, or even twice a month at the grocery store, or maybe every other month. But the point of CBD is a daily supplement. It's not, some people take it, when I have a headache, when I'm feeling down, when I'm whatever. That's fine. But I don't take it like that. I take it every day. And when I don't take it and go, oh my gosh, I feel amazing, or it's kind of like coffee. I can tell when I didn't have it, right? I can by 10 or 11 a.m., I'm like, oh crap, I forgot to take my CBD. That's why I'm so irritable. And that's why my hips hurt so bad. So when you line all those things up, the ingredient side, the Workman's Relief brand, I saw that all as unique and worthwhile and not just another flash in the pan or really hole to dig out of for a company. But it was really the vision for fiber and the capabilities that these guys have to do that for that region. Because while I&D and all the Bass Core and all these other fiber companies exist, and I'm cheering them on, like I'm literally cheering them on, go, 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 go. That doesn't bother me. We're in our little portion of the country, and that's the hemp that we're going to process, and that's the hemp that we're going to get contracts for to go out to different places. And the reality is, we're probably going to have to work with these other fiber companies. I mean, I compare it to, and I know I'm talking a lot, so I'll try to circle in this out and let you ask some questions, but I compare it a lot to the Hemp Roundtable. And everybody says, like, how did the Hemp Roundtable get started? It was me, 4 other guys, and we were the Kentucky Hemp Industry Council. And we were controlling a lot of the conversation in D.C. because of who we are and who we were talking to and who was controlling that conversation in D.C. But the issue was there was, 20 to 40 decent-sized CBD brands out there that were doing things right. They were looking at the supplement laws. They were looking at labeling. They were testing. They were really treating it like a real business that were also lobbying in DC. And they didn't know what we were saying, and we didn't know what they were saying. And then the conversations were getting confused. Add on top of that, all the people that weren't doing it right, that still have loud voices and still have people in Congress that were confusing the hell out of them and really confusing these politicians to the point where they were just, politicians are it's easier for them to just be like, well, I just don't get it. Like, let's step back, as opposed to if you come in with a unified voice, we can actually get some stuff accomplished. And so I set out to, along with Jonathan Miller and a few others, to get the Charlotte's Webs, the Bluebirds, the Elixinols at the time, like all these people that were really big and that were getting traction in retail stores and were out there in the public, people buying their bottles left and right, lined up around the corner to buy their bottles in some cases, to say, hey, let's go at this together. We all want the same thing. Let's get in a room. Let's, instead of all of us spending $150,000 a year on different lobbyists, let's all chip in on one lobbyist and deal with it. And that right when that happened, it was perfect timing. Well, not perfect timing, but it was lucky timing that it happened, was when all the state issues started coming up. Indiana, Louisiana, Texas, and it was just state after state. And what it really taught me was, like, I grew up in Kentucky. We're known for our bourbon, but I lived in a county that doesn't sell alcohol. And so that's the way government works. The federal government can say marijuana is legal tomorrow. Doesn't matter. Kentucky still would have to legalize it. And then your county would still have to legalize it. And it's just, you don't know all this stuff until you go through it. And so the Roundtable was in a position that the fiber and the food industry are similarly in. And, it's unfortunate the Roundtable did kind of turn into a CBD lobbying group only, because that's the only thing that needed lobbying at the time. And the groups that wanted to do fiber or food, they're like, well, why would I pay all that money so you guys can go get your stuff done? We're good. Like, we can grow this, we can sell this. There's no questions. And there's a little bit, but there's nothing we need to do. Well, now it's kind of circled back.
It's considered grass, generally, right?
Right. And now it's kind of circled back around to where, hey, you do need lobbyists. You know why? Because there's tons of government money out there to go after. There's tons of government programs and involvement that we can utilize to push the industry forward, both on the ag side and on the finished product side and everything in between. And that goes for the same at the state level and at the municipality level. And so I see the Roundtable still having an important role, and hopefully being able to utilize this opportunity to help out the food and fiber business. I mean, I know they've started the U.S., I'm going to butcher the name, but the U.S. Hemp Sustainability Foundation or something like that, to specifically talk to these politicians and talk to their government about getting that money. How do we actually measure sustainability when it comes to hemp? Right. How do we actually make it advantageous for a farmer to grow hemp over this or that, while also not hurting these? I mean, nobody wants to hurt the corn or the soy industry. I mean, well, some people do, but we can't. Like, that's just how the world goes round. And so it's just a slow progress, and you need smart people, that have done this before, advocating for you. It's not, Vote Hemp. God bless them. They've been around for 20 years, but it took the Roundtable 2 years to get done what Vote Hemp's been trying to do for 20. And that's called money, organization, and focus. That's all that is. And it's not a negative against them. It was just this broad rah, really just vote hemp. I mean, Hemp History Week and that stuff. It was a marketing thing for the existing hemp companies. Like they did, David Bronner or Dr. Bronner's and Nativa and those guys, their business was fine before hemp was legalized in the US. It was just a drawing attention to it and an advocacy thing.
Mm-hmm.
The Roundtable was actually people that were dumping millions and millions of dollars into businesses and needed to protect them. And that's why it shifted to CBD so much. Now, to grow the industry and to get involved in fiber and food, we have to activate that part of the lobby group and that side of the business. And that's kind of how I think they're similar.
That's what I get excited about. You're speaking my language.
Right.
Okay,
Right.
So you've been in the Kentucky Association, the Roundtable, Friends of Hemp president. Friends of Hemp and GHA have kind of collaborated or come together, have come together. Talk to me a little bit about what's needed when you talk about top talent in the industry. What does the industry need to do, and what's your perspective of opportunity that we have to really correct and bring light where it should have been all along, or where we should have been focused?
Sure. I'll start by saying hemp got lost in the legalization of hemp because of 3 letters, CBD. Hand up, I'm just as guilty as everybody. Nobody should feel bad about that. That's just life, and that's how things go. And as I said at the time, CBD was such a thing from 15, 16, 17, 18. And I used to say this to our team, my old team. I used to say, we're never going to get another opportunity like this. There will never, ever in the history of our lives be another product that comes along that transforms the natural products industry, or probably maybe not industry because we haven't gotten to the materials and food side, but that transforms the natural products industry and flips it on its head to where, like I said, you had stores with hundreds of people lined up to get CBD in some cases. You had health food stores that were almost going out of business, opening up 2nd and 3rd locations because of the revenue that CBD brought in. Mm-hmm. And I think that same thing can be said about where we are with the hemp industry again. And so you bring up Friends of Hemp, and I think because hemp got lost, we really need to steer the national conversation to the layman, to the general public, back to what hemp really is. Because I think there's always been that confusion of like, oh, hemp is rope and marijuana is smoke. And, I've got a pair of hemp sandals, and I've got, everybody's got this little hemp touch to their life or their opinion. And it's like, well, no, what hemp really is sustainability. And you can look at social media at the Friends of Hemp Instagram page or whatever, and you can see all the different things that we're talking about, whether it's building or food or health or whatever. There's so many different things. We spent 2 hours just narrowing it down to 12 back when we were going to do monthly themes. And it's like, okay, people have heard of a checkoff campaign. Everybody's heard of got milk, beef, it's what's for dinner, cotton, the fabric of our lives. The hemp industry can have 20 of those, right? If we wanted. But what we really need to have is a concerted educational campaign for the general public that says hemp is all these things. And as much as you're confused about cannabinoids or this or that, what it really is the future. And I think that's where Hemp for Our Future came from. It answers so many questions when it comes to sustainability. And so, you look at all the various nonprofits, and I've been with all of them, as you mentioned. I've been president of most of them. And a lot of the nonprofits, they all mean well. Everybody that volunteers and says, hand up, I'll be on the board, we all mean well. But at the end of the day, volunteers don't get paid. It's not what we think about when we're trying to put money in our pocket or food on our table. And so, like with any board, and coming from the nonprofits, I learned this, like a lot of people get voluntold. And they end up there, and then their schedule gets busy, and it just becomes a lower priority. So my whole thing has always been every nonprofit wants to do everything, right? Like every 501c6 trade association also wants to lobby, and then they also want to take on grants, and they also want to do the advertising or the marketing campaign and stuff. And it's like, well, that's number one, you don't have enough people or money to do all that. Number two, that's not really how these things work. We used to talk about swim lanes when it came to CBD, and I think these nonprofits have swim lanes, right? So my whole vision was, all right, we have this 501c3 that's Friends of Hemp. Mm-hmm. Now, 501c3 can take donations, you can sell swag, you can go get grants, you can do all that stuff when it comes to fundraising, right? These other groups can only have memberships, and those memberships, they want something in return for them. So what do they get? Friends of Hemp doesn't have to give you anything in return. They'll give you a sticker or a hat or whatever, depending on your
Well,
level.
they're working on research or consumer demand campaign as a sum for the industry versus the transaction back to the one person, right?
Yeah, and you're supporting that as a whole, and you're saying like, yeah, I'm behind that. Like, think about the guy that, you know, everybody that donates to clean water initiatives or save the whales or whatever it may be. That's kind of the concept behind Friends of Hemp. And saying you are a friend of hemp means you support sustainability, you support progress, you support small farmers, big farmers, whatever it is that, however you view that industry, that's where that lane is. And all these other 501c4s and 501c6s, 501c4 is a lobbying organization. That's what they're supposed to do. They're supposed to create memberships or collect money from however they deem that term. And that money is supposed to go towards lobbying, either at the state level or at the federal level. 501c6 can do a little bit of lobbying, but they're really a industry trade. And what do you think of when you think of industry trade? Networking, industry conversation, solving industry problems, collaboration, coming together. The conference we were just at, NOCO, that is an industry conference. Those conversations we were having in those private rooms are networking, and NOCO's just an event thing. They're not a 501c6. You know, I don't know when the last time one of these other 501c6s had a conference, but again, COVID, yeah, I get it. But it's like everybody wants to do everything, and everybody wants to have their name in the news saying, oh yeah, we went and met with Mitch McConnell. We went and did this. And finally I was like, y'all can have it. Like, I don't want to go to DC. I feel like I have to take a shower every time I leave there and just not getting anything. Like, I'm all about progress. And so my thing was, and I've been preaching this for like 6 months to anybody that'll listen. Hey, let's find one 501c3, one 501c4, one 501c6, and then one certification type program. And you kind of got everything nailed. And because of who I've worked with and who I believe in and how I kind of single-mindedly do this, it's pretty simple. Friends of Hemp is the 501c3. The U.S. Hemp Roundtable, which has zero competitors as far as I'm concerned when it comes to voice and power and lobbying, both at D.C. and at many state levels, becomes the lobbying group. Global Hemp Association is doing this, exactly what you're doing, this conversation, this networking, this education, industry on industry crime, or whatever you want to call it. Like, this is what trade associations do, and that's what they should be doing. So boom, you got your 501c6. And then I'm also on the board of the U.S. Hemp Authority, which was started while I was president of the U.S. Hemp Roundtable. And it was started because we wanted to have self-regulation. It was a bunch of companies that wanted to have self-regulation. And it's evolved and it's changed, you know, what definitions we have and how we communicate and those types of things. And, you know, some people have poo-pooed it and hated it all along the way. And some people have finally been like, oh, you know what? Like, that's actually going to be beneficial. And I'll tell you what, some people are going to be really surprised in a few months when it's required in certain states because, well, you know, everybody thinks that you just snap your fingers and you legalize hemp and, oh, you passed this bill in Kentucky and now these are the rules. Well, if those are the rules in Kentucky and then these are the rules in Vermont and then these are the rules in New York and you've got all these different health departments and ag departments just so confused. They don't know what you're doing. Now, on top of that, after they get all these rules in place for CBD, now people are making stuff they've never heard of, Delta 8, THCO, stuff that people can get high from, which is the opposite of everything that was said to them while these products were legalized. And listen, I'm not saying it's wrong. I am one of those people. You could look back at 2016 when people were saying what you're doing is illegal. I would say, find me a law where it says what I'm doing is illegal. And they couldn't. But I also couldn't find a law where it said what I was doing was legal. So what happened was we wrote laws that made what we were doing legal, but maybe they didn't do this question. So people are interpreting them in certain ways. So I'm not against that. I'm all for bending or pressing the law to its extreme, I would say. But
we definitely like the industry poked our own bear. I mean,
yes. But at the same time, if you look at the big picture, you don't want to cut off your nose to spite your face, is the old saying, right? So, you know, there's people in Kentucky that are quoted in the news saying that because Kentucky outlawed Delta 8, it's costing Kentucky and Kentucky farmers billions of dollars, billions with a B. Now, what new nascent startup industry, much less an existing, like forever business in the state of Kentucky, which is tiny, is worth billions of dollars? None. because you have people that just don't actually understand math or don't actually understand like the greater good. They just want freedom and they want to do whatever they want. Well, that's all fine and dandy until some kid dies or somebody gets a bad product and gets sick and ends up in the hospital or whatever. Like
the lack of regulation has stopped money from moving in, right? And
1000%.
Got to be something that steps in, and FDA has to step in at some point and regulate that little CBD bottle.
And I'll give a plug for regulatecbdnow.com. That is a big push, obviously, by the U.S. Hemp Roundtable, but it should be a big push. Whether you like the Roundtable, support the Roundtable, have even heard of it, that should be every person in the hemp industry's thing, because regulating CBD is a good thing.
Yes.
It's not a bad thing. Anybody that says it's a bad thing is either bad at business or doesn't really understand, or they're just really selfish and they don't really understand the greater good of what we're trying to do. Because, you know, it's like I met a company the other day that was selling CBD products, and they were they were asking me about getting into a distributor. And I was just kind of rattling off like, yeah, to go through this distributor, you have to have X, Y, Z, blah, 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 and just mentioned the word insurance. They're like, oh, we have to have insurance? I was like, you mean you're selling products to humans that are putting it in their body and you don't have any liability insurance? And they're like, no, I hadn't even thought about that. I was like, this is what I'm saying. Like, this is what we're dealing with. These are common sense things that people need to be focused on and understand. And when you don't have set rules and regulations from someone, and it's impossible for someone to come in and say, well, you're bad and you're good if there's no defining characteristics. Then
or what's legal and what's not, like you said, you know, and I think that that's just it, is then we end up poking our own bear. And what it taught us is, you know, America likes to get high. People like to get high.
Yeah.
You know? Okay. So I want to go back. I want to shift back to the fiber conversation and opportunity. Can you tell me a little bit about the Accelerator Program you guys are working on and intentions there?
Yeah. So, like I said, we were in the ingredients side. We, you know, checked all the boxes, certified organic, GMP. We can remediate THC. We're in a LEED certified building, doing everything right. We took on an investment / partnership from Kemin, who is a global ingredients distributor, and that really shored up that side of the business, which is nice because they're going to be distributing our ingredients as well. And the Workman's Relief brand is trucking right along. We just got into Tractor Supply, and we're in over 600 stores now. And the reorder data is proving us right that, like, yeah, people will rebuy this if it's 40, if they realize the bang for the buck. Yeah. And so all that's, you know, swimming right along, but all the time, we've got this little corner of our eye on the fiber piece. And you know, we're always trying to have conversations and meet with people, and those conversations have gone from the automobile industry to the Department of Defense to feminine hygiene to stuff that animal bedding, all the stuff that comes in between when you're trying to get from A to Z. And so, you know, because of all this government money funding coming online for sustainability, particularly, not even hemp really, we launched a 501c3 technology accelerator in Wisconsin. And so the way that'll operate is it's a materials technology accelerator. Anyone that wants to create materials. So if you came to us and said, I have a injection molding, or I have a feminine hygiene product, or I want to do automobile stuff, or any idea that's out there, you could basically run it through a technology accelerator where we could go out and prove the concept and then work the numbers backwards and say, okay, if you want to make X amount of this product at this level of hemp production, here's all the cogs you need in place. Here's how many acres you need. Here's how much it's going to cost. And you run the numbers backwards to say, all right, now you have a proof of concept that it can be done on a trial size. To do it at mass, it's going to cost X. And hey, you know, Johnson & Johnson or Department of Defense or whoever you are, you got $10 million, you know, Driftless or I&D or whomever it might be, wherever, you know, because it's all going to be geographically located. You know, this is how you can do it. And so it really is, again, moving the industry forward. Like, that's the whole point, is to bring in ideas and concepts. You know, I used to own a website. I own friendsofhemp.org, and I own a bunch of different websites, all different ideas I had. And the idea was the Hemp Hub. And the Hemp Hub was going to be a place, kind of like a co-working place, where all these different people with all these different ideas would come and work, but they would also have a place where they could share ideas and they could throw ideas against the wall and see what sticks and that kind of thing. And that's really what we're creating here with the Accelerator, is an opportunity for both hemp people and non-hemp people alike that are interested in sustainability to come together and have ideas on projects. My big idea, which is probably the dumbest idea in the world, right, is how do we get cardboard boxes? And not just cardboard boxes. My thing is pizza boxes. I want pizza boxes made out of hemp. So obviously that's a pulping exercise. You're replacing cardboard. But if you do it with pizza boxes, obviously Amazon would be the better option because everybody gets those delivered to their door. But pizza boxes with education on them so that it says this is hemp and this is the future, like things like that. Like, that's obviously not a big idea. That's probably a small idea in comparison to Amazon. But if we can work towards those goals and we can get to where we at least understand what's the reality of some of these things. Because as my good friend Trey Riddle said to me many times, it doesn't matter how sustainable it is. It doesn't matter how compostable it is, how recyclable, all those things that we love to do. If it costs more, it doesn't matter.
Yep.
And so all those things that we want to remake, like if we want to remake this mouse, right? I need to know how much it costs to make this mouse and I need to beat it. And there's a certain break point where that'll happen if we produce 2,000 acres as opposed to 20,000 acres. And, those numbers change based on that kind of stuff. But that's all stuff we got to do. And that's stuff that, honestly, the CBD industry didn't do. I once asked an ag economist, what happened to some of these folks that went bankrupt? And I won't mention any names, but he goes, the best I can figure is they all sat around and it was go, 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 right? But nobody with an MBA or really a business brain said, well, what happens if the price goes down? And what happens to our business if we run out of customers that can afford it at this price? How do we adjust? How do we adapt? And you mentioned COVID and the oversaturation of the CBD industry, and it drives me crazy. I hear these earnings calls. I think there's one this week where my old CEO, who was the CFO when I was there, which is why accountants should never be CEOs, but gets on there and he's got every excuse in the book as to why revenue's down 70%. And it's like, you make excuses when revenue's down 7 or 17%. When revenue's down 70%, that just means people aren't. That obviously something's not working. Like, that's crazy. And for a long time, Charlotte's Web and CV Sciences were neck and neck. They jumped out in front when they went public by about 12 million a year. Now they do 75 million a year more, and they haven't had a negative. They've only grown 1% or whatever the past 2 years. But
1% is still growth.
That's better than negative 70, right? And again, there's a lot that goes into it. They're spending more money and they're not. And there's lots of details that go into it. But it's also, it just shows that it can be done. And it's not something that has crashed. Otherwise, Charlotte's Web would have declining revenue. I truly believe that. I know other companies that don't have declining revenue. They have invested
millions of dollars in research to open the market.
Like you wouldn't believe. Yeah. And to their credit, I'm friends with the Stanley brothers. Those guys, when they went public, they went out and hired someone from Kellogg's. They hired people that had been in these big operational systems before. Yeah. And understood how to move things forward. Now, they might tell you that didn't work out, or that, they might have a different opinion about it. But if you look at just paper, it certainly worked out a lot better than some of these other folks that were hesitant or refused to make that big jump. So yeah, I think, it's funny. We have these conversations. I do podcast interviews. I used to have my own podcast, and it's now 2022. We're still having the same conversations. It's just more people are into the fiber thing, because back in the 16, 17, 18, I was saying the same things about fiber. I was saying, like, hey, when are we going to shift back over to this? Hey, how do we get more fiber companies that at the time didn't exist to join the Roundtable, which was impossible, because they're like, why would I give you all that money to go lobby for CBD? Mm-hmm. And it's like, that's a good point. I don't know. Now we have a legitimate reason for that to happen. And, I think CBD is amazing. I take it every day. I think it's just the growing pains, right? Like, there's a lot of that. There's a lot of fallout from folks that just had no business being in that part of the industry, right? You had a lot of ag folks or farm folks that really, people grew hemp and then shipped it off to somebody and then had the oil shipped back to them at their farm, sitting in their barn, because it was valuable at that time. Not anymore. And as much as that sucks, and as much as people want to say, oh, these politicians and whoever it is that you disagree with is hurting the small farmer, small farmers are really only hurting themselves. And, I hear farmers, it's a business. Exactly. And I hear farmers all the time say, oh, this CBD company or the CBD market this or the CBD market that. It's like, well, you've been farming for 30 years. Like, surely you're smart enough to realize when someone comes in and says, hey, I need you to take those 20 acres that you were making, $500, $600 profit on, and you were probably only spending $400 or $500 in input costs per acre. I want you to spend $10,000 per acre on input costs, but I'm going to pay you 30. Like, something has to trigger in your brain that says, well, that, number one, that can't be right. And if it is right, it can't be right for very long, right?
That's what I was going to say. And for how long, right?
And now they all, and I feel for them because I own a small farm. I can't imagine losing that kind of money. Luckily, I was paid up front when I grew hemp, or I would have really lost my mind. But they, everybody wants to point fingers and point blame around. And it's like, listen, this is a new nascent industry. Everybody's taking risks. Goes back to the first thing I said. My old founders could have gone to jail, federal prison for many, 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 many years. And I just always talked about the cojones it took to do what they were doing and the pure belief that they were doing something that wasn't illegal, right? And it wasn't like, oh, we're importing this mysterious substance like it's meth or heroin or something. It was like, hey, we've got all these scientific studies that show there's nothing intoxicating about this. We've got all these scientific studies that show this is a natural. It'd be like the first time it was explained to me, like extraction was like, what if you could juice that plant and get all the goodies out of it? Like, yeah, that makes sense. All right. Well, if all those goodies are good and there's nothing bad about them, I think in 14 or 15, whatever year Colorado legalized marijuana, when people were freaking out from taking too much marijuana, I'm pretty sure they were giving them CBD to bring them back down to even it out. So I was like, well, you're kind of breaking the law, but like, what's really, if you don't believe that the law is right, a great example is when David Bronner planted hemp seeds in the front lawn of the DEA, right? And he got, or when he locked himself in a cage with hemp plants in front of the DEA and he got arrested and they interviewed him afterwards. There's a little snippet in like the Washington Post. And he was like, look, I'm all about drawing attention to problems that we need answers to, we need changed. But we also sold a lot of soap that week. You know what I mean? Like, so it's also, there's obviously a huge reward for the risk. And now we're past all that point.
Look what Woody and Joe did.
Exactly.
Put that project together and the risk that they had to take on, not knowing that it would take one wrong DEA agent to show up or something to happen, and the risk that you
100%.
in putting a
I imported some hemp oil or some hemp extract from Europe to my farm in Kentucky when we were having a little issue getting some stuff through the thing. It got seized by customs. It's set in customs for 18 months to the point where I was super nervous when it got seized. It was there for so long I forgot about it. Completely forgot it was there. They finally released it and it was rancid, so it was just bad, throw it out. We actually had to pay for 18 months of storage, which is their fault. We didn't want to store it there. Right. But that's how you get over the hump. There's so many people out there that want to just snap their fingers and everything's legal and we've got this free open market and everybody can compete. It's just never how it gets done. Jonathan gave the talk, or he was on my panel at NOCO, and someone said, because he was saying, we're going to have to attach this language probably to the Farm Bill again. And the only way to get this stuff through is must pass bills like the Farm Bill or the spending bill or some of these things. To get an individual bill to go to the House and then go to the Senate and then go to the president's desk, it just doesn't happen anymore. And someone said, well, if these other bills are so good, why aren't we focusing all our efforts on getting these bills passed? And Jonathan slowly raised the mic to his mouth and he goes, Congress is broken. And I was like, that's all he had to say. And he went on to explain, but he was like, Congress is broken. It doesn't work like that. If you grew up on Schoolhouse Rock, there's not a single bill in the last, I don't know how many years, that's been passed that way. It all gets shoved onto another bill or stacked over here, and then you end up with these 200-page bills that no one reads.
Categories. And this is where it becomes important to have a voice or somebody that understands where those bills get passed and where, like when I learned how the Farm Bill went through or how the 2014, hemp Farm Bill became legal, it was like, I just didn't understand. And I didn't understand.
And this is the thing, Mitch McConnell, like him or not, agree with his politics or not, I personally do not. I'm a registered independent, have been since I started down this hemp path. He's been in office longer than I've been alive, so I clearly don't necessarily agree with him. But he's a political ninja. And both those farm bills you just mentioned don't happen without Mitch McConnell. So, Jonathan Miller is a very left-leaning when it comes to political stuff, and he often has to compliment Mitch McConnell, which probably makes his skin bubble. Like he's seething doing it. But like that's what I love about Jonathan. Jonathan understands how the game is played, and he's one of the best at playing it. Just like Mitch McConnell is one of the best at playing it on the actual politics side. So, like it or not, it's not all peaches and cream. It's not all smiles and rainbows. It's a tough business. It's an uphill climb, and it's sludging through the mud and getting past all the, wannabes or whatever you want to call them that think they have the wherewithal and the money and the energy and the vision to get something done when they don't even really understand how it works. And that's not to negate what they want to do. It's just to say like, hey, you have to let the people that know what they're doing do it. And that's how we get from point A to B. Now, you may not agree with it. You're not going to get everything you want, but
giving credit where, like you said, the people that know and the people that have been in it for a long time, we get I still hear a lot of groups trying to connect or start. I mean, even GHA, right? Starting, I heard often, like there's all these other associations. And for me, it wasn't about building a new association. It was about doing something that provided opportunity for people to connect and come together and make change. And so with that, though, I see a ton of, we've got to be able to lean into what's there and what knowledge is already available or resources and people are available.
To that point, I think there's 18 different organizations and people and groups that take credit for the past 2 farm bills. So
yeah. Yeah.
It's funny. And, it's just one of those things that you almost want to turn it off sometimes and just focus and laser in on what you're doing and go make your money. But you can't. I mean, trust me, I've tried to do it. You cannot do that. If you want to be a player in this industry and you want to have a real level of respect, eventually it'll catch up to you, right? If you're over here doing your own thing and you're saying everybody else is wrong, and you're like, eventually you'll be the one that's on the outside looking in. So that's, and maybe it's just my nature. I'm all about collaboration. I have business development calls where I open the call by saying, this call could go one of 3 ways. Or it could obviously go a bunch more ways. But if this call goes well, it could go one of 3 ways. You're going to be doing business with me. I'm going to be doing business with you. Or it's going to be going both ways. And that's going to make us both really happy. And that's how I look at everything. Every conversation, every opportunity it's not good for anybody if it's not good for everybody. Because at the end of the day, we've got to get to where we're trying to go. And that's not going to be peachy keen. It's going to be a tough situation. You're going to have to make sacrifices. You're never going to get everything you want. It's just like people want to, why wasn't 1% in the last farm bill? Because do you know how hard we had to work to get everything else in there? And do you know, like,
to get it to pass it all?
Yeah. And the people that were pushing for 1%, it's like, you realize 4 years ago, our whole thing was built on the fact that 0.3% was so low and that you would never hit it and that you could never get high and stuff. Well, now you're raising it 3 times, and to a Mitch McConnell's 85-year-old brain, in his head, he's like, well, now we're talking about stoners, it's just, you have to be there to really understand it, but it is a mess trying to get through it. And that's why we need people like Jonathan Miller. We need people like Samantha Walsh. We need people like Bob Hoban, who's not even a lobbyist. He's more of a business attorney, but they're sophisticated enough and intelligent enough to navigate some of these pathways that we're trying to go down. And then that's just talking about lobbying. You talk about Amin Talati and some of these FDA attorneys that have helped people understand, like, not only can you not say this on your bottle, you can't have a Facebook comment that says it does X, Y, and Z. You can't have this, you can't have that, so that you don't get shut down. I mean, the first recommendation I make to every, or used to make to every company, now only make it to Driftless, is you need an FDA attorney, you need a high level of insurance, and you need a cannabis attorney, someone that understands how niche your business is and that this isn't going to be, another whatever t-shirt store or something, right? Like,
again, I think this is a lot of regular business, like common sense, or what I would consume common sense around business.
Right? See, I'm trying to stay away from the common sense term
because there really isn't any, right? That word.
No, I get told that I say a lot. I say, like, when I'm talking like this, I say a lot of times, like, this is just common sense, right? And I guess that's offensive to people that it's not common sense to. But to me, yeah, to you and we're looking at how to make this a business. Yeah.
It's business, right? We're going back to business. I'm not going to hire a divorce attorney to do my taxes, right? It's a same thing. If I'm running a cannabis business, I've got to have somebody that's educated. And that goes down to marketing or language or anything that we're working on to grow business. I've noticed a major impact in the time that it requires to train someone about hemp. How is hemp sustainable? Right? And what does that look like? And how do we fit into grants, or how do we move forward in different conversations on marketing without the education? And so same thing, if I'm going to be the most successful, I'm looking for people that have been in the industry, that understand the routes, that understand business and business practices. And so, yeah, well, I could keep talking for a long time. I, of course, have a lot of questions as this keeps going. I'd love to do an update with you in 6 months or a year at least, where we can kind of find out. I'm really excited about your Accelerator program and the things you guys are putting together as a team, especially on the fiber side. That's what's driven my passion. You made a comment earlier about, people making or investing a lot, or running business. You see a lot of people running business the same way, right? When I first saw this or first started this, I saw over and over again people installing the same equipment, knowing that there was another technology that was much more cost effective and efficient,
knowing that same equipment exists 20 minutes down the road.
A block away, less than
a block away.
I mean, literally, I walked into one extraction facility to another extraction facility, and they were both installing similar equipment for millions of dollars. And I was holding an extraction technology that was pennies on the dollar to what they were doing. And so it was really like eye-opening to me about where industry was and what we needed to do to come together. And so I lean back on top talent, hiring top talent, and the collaboration. And so I would love to collaborate more. If there's other people out there, that's my jam. It's what I love, being the glue that can hold some of these conversations together and drive conversation. And also what I saw in this, Josh, is a reduction in bad actors, right? As conversation is bred and more people start working together, you start to figure out not only what works, but what's not working. And then it becomes, elevating good players and elevating those that are doing it right.
Yeah. And if you know me, patience probably not one of my strong suits. That's why I didn't think I would have kids. Now I have a 2-year-old, so I think I'm getting better with the patience thing. But to your point, like, patience is a virtue in this industry, and I think if you have that and you understand what you just said, that eventually the bad actors weed themselves out, right? They move on to the next thing, what is it, ketamine or something else, whatever else it is.
Yeah.
But I think there's been oftentimes in the past 3 to 5 years, 3 years, I guess, since COVID, since the end of 19, when it all kind of hit the ceiling, as we'll say, where I've been like, I wonder, should I just do something else? Should I get into another industry and do biz dev for them? Like, what else is coming? Psilocybin, but what else is out there? And it's like, no, I put in too much work the past 6 years to go do something different. And I've aligned myself with this group that has one of the most beautiful long-term visions of any company I've seen in the country. I want to help them get to where they want to go with that. And that means aligning them with all the right people. To your point, it's not just talent that you bring within, it's talent that you partner with, talent that you even just have dinner with, that you let mentor you. I've been blessed to have, because of the Roundtable, honestly, I've been blessed to develop relationships with the CEOs of all the big CBD companies. Probably not something that CV Sciences liked when I was doing it, but it ended up working out well for me now. And, those guys I hear their battle cries. I hear their, they tell me about their wounds, and they tell me about their ups and downs. And it's impressive how different some of them are, whether you're on this side of legitimacy or on this side of legitimacy. And it's eye-opening how many people don't have that FDA attorney guiding them, or don't even really understand, that, you get into GNC. Let's say you see a big announcement, someone got into 300 or 5,000 GNC stores or whatever. Well, that's great. But if you put a product on the shelf and it just sits there and collects dust, you just shot your business in the foot, because you're going to end up owing them money at the end of the day.
Right.
And a lot of people just don't get that. So to really push this into normalcy, we'll call it, right, it's got to be more affordable. And that's all going to happen over time, right? COGS go down, quantities go up. That's the name of the game. But it's got to be more affordable. And I don't just mean CBD. I mean every single thing across the board. It's got to be more affordable. No one is going to buy hempcrete if concrete's cheaper. I mean, they will, but we're not talking about an industry. We're talking about a niche business.
I think the big thing is scale. If we're going to scale or really commercialize what we're doing, it's got to be cost competitive. And over again, I've got a good girlfriend who runs a large grocery store, has been there for years. And we were talking about ordering bags and how they are now passing or transferring the cost of the bag onto the customer. So of course I was like, oh, this is my moment.
I'm in California. They definitely passed that along to me.
Yeah. But as soon as I said a bag for a backyard compostable or a biodegradable bag was a penny more, she literally laughed in my face. She was like, yeah, we're never doing that. Even though they're not paying it, that barrier, right, of out-of-pocket cost for them to increase millions and millions of bags for a penny a bag, it adds up.
No, I mean hundreds of millions of bags.
Yeah. So
and your point is scale is the key. That should be the focus of any public talks that I give for the rest of my life. Really should be, how do we get this to scale? And you're not going to get to scale, no offense, by saving the small farmer. You have to work with big ag. Like, that's what I learned when I was going around giving this conversation about the ultimate disruption, right? We were disrupting ag, we're disrupting pharma, we're disrupting retail, we're disrupting the consumer, the way they think about their health, the way they look at their sleep, the way they look at all this different stuff. And it was like, yeah, we are disrupting it, but at the end of the day, we're going to have to collaborate with them, because we need the retailer, we need the big farmer, we need big ag, we need big supplements. Like, we need to marry all these things together so that we're just another cog in this very legal, very clear-cut industry that exists, and consumers are just grabbing that stuff off the shelves. Like, that's where we're trying to get to. And everybody wants to go real slow, and, everybody thinks like, oh, you have to do this, this, and this first. It's not always the case. I think it really is. It all comes back to how much can you do it? I often say, oh, we overproduced CBD and nobody analyzed the market, and we grew whatever it is, 10x the actual market need in 2019 or 2020, whatever year it was. And that's fine. That's really normal. Like, ag farmers always overproduce. But imagine if CBD hadn't been the boom, and all these farmers had gone out and grown a bunch of fiber, and they all just had bales and bales and bales of fiber sitting around. And we were all like, man, we've got this oversupply of fiber that doesn't go bad. And now someone just needs to make the investment to turn it into materials, and we've got a business. That'd be a good problem to have. So, I hope that we can slowly shift towards that, where maybe 2024, 2025, we're like, oh crap, we grew too much fiber this year. And because you have to do that. You have to peak and then correct and then find your line.
You think it'll be as soon as 2024, 2025?
No, I'm
okay.
Overestimating.
I agree with you. We're going to see a ton of processors come on board before we start to peak, right?
Well, what's different about the fiber side than the CBD side is there's a lot of processors coming on board, that haven't even poured concrete yet. And so we'll see who actually comes up. And it sucks, because I wish they would all come on board. The issue is going to be money. And the issue in fiber used to be, well, all the money's going towards cannabinoids. Now the issue is there ain't no money out there, because everybody got burned on cannabinoids. They got burned by, I don't know, the stock market, whatever their thing is.
corn and soybean are at an all-time high. Like our competitive crops, it's just a whole new set of challenges that come on every year, especially with our bread bowl being limited in production.
Yeah. And, we were able to accomplish what we've been able to accomplish, which is quite impressive. And mainly the founders of our company, I say we, with very little investment. I don't say very little, but comparatively, you're talking about 10% of the amount of money that these other extraction companies have spent to get to where they are, which is not even close to the revenue that we have, right? So just the numbers flip like this. Mm-hmm. That's not the same when it comes to fiber. We're talking about, and I just saw the equipment is millions. Yes, that is exactly what I was about to say, because we're not talking about a couple $1,000,000 to get going on fiber. You're talking about 20, 30, $40 million to really get going and really get cranking and really service a geographical area. And that's what we're about to embark on.
Contract that's going to scale.
And a reason.
I hear this all the time, right? There's two different types, and we've gone way over, so we're going to have to wrap up here in a second because we can keep talking. But there's two completely different sides to this, right? You get these mobile decorticators or smaller facilities that are processing smaller volume, but at some point our market is going to tip, and now we're no longer going to be cost competitive in that large contract. And so I'd like to dive in more. That's something I want to learn. And I meant to actually talk to Bo about it, sit down and really dive in with him while we were at NOCO. But
I had an interesting conversation with Bo about it. It's very similar to this. It's a little bit of chicken and an egg situation. Yeah. Those small processors you mentioned, unless they have a plan to expand, then that small processor could really focus on some niche products and have a really nice sustainable business, or localized products. Yeah.
For sure. Yeah. I look at, like, especially if you get these smaller products, and you see them popping up, right? One company, for example, South Bend, is doing a really good job at expanding and partnering with local farmers or areas where they're putting additional processing in. Now they collectively can supply a bigger contract, right? So this is a topic that I'm very interested in. And when we look at scale and volume, not only the $20 million for the size of the facility, but looking at automation and machine learning that comes for those higher value products.
Well, and a lot of these fiber companies are in areas where labor might be an issue, right? Or skilled labor might be an issue. And it's going to take, it's no different, right? If you're in the fiber business and you want to build a decorticator, you're going to need an engineer, and you're going to need someone that probably has a PhD in biocomposites, whatever it is you're trying to do. Everybody wants to just do it, and nobody wants to get the people in there that know what they're doing. And that's something that I desperately think we need. I mean, we've talked about having hemp job fairs where it's really just like a, inbound type thing where you could sort through and create like talent pools and talent lists, stuff like that.
Yeah.
So
that's a whole other
industry as a whole. Yeah.
It's a whole other piece of this. Okay, well, let's sign off. We've gone an hour and 20 minutes. Like I said, I could keep going. I'd like to have Josh back. Like I said, you and your team, I'd love to continue to collaborate on this. I'd also like to dive in maybe offline with you where we can collaborate or what we need to do to bring some of those bigger organizations on to support these, the development of new products, where we've got a handful of possibilities now where we've got 20 to 50,000 said products that could potentially come from this. And so it gets pretty exciting on what opportunities might be there. So anyways, thank you very much for joining me, Josh. I really appreciate it. Anything you want to say before we sign off?
No, I think, I hope that nobody takes anything I say too negatively. I know I can be a bit pessimistic to some people. It's really just realism. I've been around this long enough to learn some hard lessons, but also some really good lessons. And I take the positives and really push them forward. And the positives are simple. The hemp industry is sustainable. That's where the world is going. That's where our country is going. It may take longer than we all like, but if we keep our heads down and we keep pushing towards scale and sustainability, I think we'll be all right.
I love it. Brooke and Saba, thank you very much. Brooke, I'd love to hear your idea. This is what fuels us. Also, I want to give a quick shout out. Any specific questions or topics that you guys are looking to have addressed, or people or industries that we're looking to talk to? I'd love to hear about them or who they are. Bring them on as a guest, either as a speaker or to one of our panel or group discussions for members or our public events. But really with an opportunity to connect those dots and drive more attention to the industry. So don't hesitate to reach out to me or anybody on our team. We'd love to have you. You can join our GHA membership on globalhempassociation.org, where there's lots of content, or you can donate to Global Hemp Association and Friends of Hemp on the Friends of Hemp website. What's the website for Friends of Hemp, Josh? friendsofhemp.org.
Friendsofhemp.org. I used to own it myself.
Easy breezy. Awesome. Okay. Well, thank you very much, you guys. And we'll see you